Hello, this is Vlad, and a new author's story from my channel Life Story.
I'm sitting here, waiting, with my Colt M1000 91101 in one hand and a shot glass of expensive scotch in the other, anticipating the moment the police arrive. I set down the empty glass and light up a cigar, letting the flavor and nicotine soothe my nerves. The flashing lights and sirens are inevitable now, but this story starts years ago, when I met Paula Hansen. We were both in the Army at the time. I was in my second year of my second four-year hitch, having achieved the rank of Staff Sergeant. Paula was a captain in the California National Guard, with a degree in journalism. We met one night at the club on Fort Irwin and instantly connected. Paula's stunning blue eyes and flowing brunette hair captivated me. My name is John Blakely, and back then, I was saving up during my enlistments to go to college at UCLA with the help of the GI Bill. As fate would have it, Paula had also attended UCLA, and she still owned a house nearby. She gave me her address and number, inviting me to stay with her while I pursued my degree. We grew close during my 4 years at UCLA while I earned my degree in computer science. We were inseparable, and although temptation crossed my path, I knew Paula was the best thing to ever happen to me. Fast forward a bit, and we still didn't have any kids, not for lack of desire, but because Paula was deeply invested in her career. I respected her ambitions and wasn't going to stand in her way. She earned the same as I did, and I eventually landed a great job at a worldwide tech firm. Around this time, Paula received the enviable assignment of writing the biography of a well-known general. She had just been promoted to lieutenant colonel in the California National Guard. The trouble began when Paula was sent to Afghanistan to gather information for the general's biography. What was supposed to be a 2-week trip turned into a month. When she returned, she seemed distant and reserved. I asked her what was wrong, and she explained that she had witnessed some unsettling things overseas. Having seen combat myself, I could relate and did my best to comfort her. After some time, she seemed to return to her old self, and we carried on with our lives. A couple of years later, we moved to Washington, D.C., and that's when things took a turn. I was headhunted by the CIA and put in charge of their main IT division in Langley, Virginia. My new job paid better than the private sector, and Paula was thrilled. She was also excited to be working closely with General David Peterson again, gathering more material for his biography. The general had been appointed director of the CIA, and we often found ourselves in the same social circles. It was at one such function that I first became suspicious. Paula and the general danced 4 dances in a row, and during a slow number, his hand drifted lower than was appropriate. I had enough. I walked onto the dance floor and, as calmly as possible, asked to cut in. The general handed Paula off to me, and I let her know quietly but firmly that what I had seen was unacceptable. Paula laughed it off, saying the general was just being his usual self, but doubts about her faithfulness and his intentions had already begun to take root. That night, when we got home, Paula and I had a heated discussion. I expressed my frustration and concern, but she assured me that everything was fine and that I had nothing to worry about. I'm sick of that guy getting too close to you on the dance floor. I don't care if he's the head of the CIA. That doesn't give him the right to invade another man's space, especially when it comes to my wife, I said through gritted teeth. Stop being jealous, baby. He was just flirting, Paula smirked, clearly not taking the situation as seriously as I was. No, Paula, this isn't just jealousy. You didn't do anything to stop him or discourage him. And that bothers me, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. I was jealous, sure, but I also couldn't ignore what I was seeing, and it felt like it was being rubbed in my face. It should tell you to trust your wife, John, Paula replied, playing the trust card. Okay, no problem. I do trust you, sweetheart. I just don't trust him, I said, shaking my head slowly. Well, he's your boss, so you'd better trust him, Paula joked, sticking her tongue out and crossing her eyes, reminding me of one of the many reasons I fell in love with her in the first place. I couldn't help but laugh, and she came into my arms, kissing me softly. "I think it's sweet that you were ready to defend my honor," she said, her voice gentle. "That's what I do, honey," I grinned, kissing her again. Later that night, we lay together in bed, the earlier tension dissipated. We talked, laughed, and simply enjoyed being with each other. I knew she had picked up on my mood when I cut in on the dance, and it seemed like she got a bit of a thrill out of it. Everything got back to normal for a few months. Paula transferred to the Virginia National Guard and was quickly on the fast track. She was also almost done with her book about General David Peterson. I read some of her transcripts and complimented her on the great job she was doing. She said I was just being supportive because I loved her, but I assured her that I would have pointed out any mistakes. The only thing that nagged at me a bit was a folder on her desk marked Top Secret. I knew she had TS clearance, and so did I, but having a TS folder in an unsecured location was a breach of protocol. However, I pushed that concern aside and focused on us, enjoying our time together. The next morning, I casually asked her about the Top Secret file. "Oh, that's been declassified," she said dismissively. "What was the operation?" I asked, curious. "It's the craziest thing," she laughed. "Some World War I operation called Wolfbane, where a U.S. Army Ranger and a British SIS operative supposedly went into Hitler's bunker and, get this, executed him along with a bunch of werewolves. I think it was written up as a joke." We laughed together, marveling at how thorough the joke was. My suspicions were alleviated for the moment, though something in the back of my mind still felt off. The next Monday at work, TSA, a member of my cyber warfare team, found me chuckling to myself. "Okay, boss, what's so funny?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I told her about the old declassified file Paula brought home, and we both spent most of the morning laughing about it while troubleshooting some systems. The rest of my team handled most of the tasks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. TSA, who had a knack for reading people, noticed right away that something was bothering me. She came into my office, closed the door behind her, and locked it. "Okay, boss, spill it. What's going on?" she asked. I sighed, knowing I had to trust her. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Understood?" "Understood, John." She nodded, her expression serious. TSA usually called me boss, but when things were important, she switched to John. "I think Paula might be considering something behind my back, if she hasn't already," I said bluntly. Her eyes widened in surprise. "She better not. If she does, I'll have to show you what real love is," she joked, but then grew serious again. "Do you really think she'd do that to you?" My expression must have said it all. From what I saw at the general's dinner the other night, yes, I do. She was way too comfortable dancing with General Peterson, our boss, and she's been trying to convince me it was just him being a harmless flirt. He could have been drunk. TSA shrugged, though she quickly realized the general didn't drink. "You're right, he wouldn't have been. So yeah, he must have done it on purpose." "Exactly," I said flatly. "And they both basically humiliated me in front of all those people." TSA hadn't been there that night, but she understood. "What I'm about to do is off the books and might be crossing some lines. If you don't want to be involved, you can leave now." She met my gaze with determination. "I'm with you, John. Whatever it is, I'm with you." "Thanks, T." I smiled, then outlined my plan. We discussed it for about 15 minutes, and she added a few ideas of her own. It reminded me of how much I valued her as a friend, and how seriously she took her job. What it boiled down to was that if Paula and General Peterson were involved in something, it could have national security implications. In our world, personal lives can have a huge impact on professional responsibilities. If a hostile power found out that the director of the CIA was having an affair, they could use that information to compromise him or anyone else involved. My job wasn't just to handle a potential divorce. It was also to protect the country. TSA and I decided to keep this operation between the two of us. I set up a dummy email account and used our system to monitor the general's and Paula's communications. Normally, this would be the NSA's job, but we had the necessary equipment at the CIA as well. We set up proxy servers, and I connected to the general's and Paula's computers to monitor their activities. I also set up my laptop to record everything, and as head of it, I could do this without raising any red flags. I had the software ready to wipe my hard drive in seconds if needed. Part of me felt conflicted about spying on them, but I knew that if something was going on, I had a duty to protect my country. I also needed to gather evidence, just in case. TSA helped by cloning the general's and Paula's cell phones and set up surveillance equipment at my house. I bugged my home phones, and TSA went undercover at the general's house for the same purpose, installing surveillance on their home phones as well. The monitoring software was set up to detect any keywords indicating unprofessional behavior, with those files automatically sent to a dummy email account I had created. I could access that account from anywhere with wireless internet, ensuring I stayed informed. It took 2 days to set everything up, and business went on as usual. I had my cell phone configured to alert me if anything suspicious was sent to my new email account. Paula and the general's communications remained professional at all times, with nothing questionable occurring. The week after that, Benghazi happened, a chaotic event from the start. 2 private contractors and our U.S. ambassador to Libya died that night. It's not my place to say whether everything possible was done, but it was clear things were spiraling out of control. That night, Paula claimed to be out with the girls in her Virginia National Guard unit. Simultaneously, General David Peterson was unreachable with his phone turned off. Around this time, I received a series of notifications from my email account, set up on a 24-hour update cycle to avoid suspicion. I typically checked it in the morning from my office, but that night I was wide awake waiting for Paula to come home. When I checked the emails, I nearly threw my iPhone across the room. Trying to stay calm, I called TSA. "Hey John, what's going on?" she asked, still groggy. "I'm forwarding some emails to you. Tell me what you think," I said, sending them from my laptop through proxy servers. After reading them, TSA was silent for a moment before letting out a stunned exclamation upon seeing the exchanges between Paula Blakely and David Peterson. "That's about the size of it, sweetie," I said, seething with anger as I began planning to use this evidence in the divorce proceedings and share it with Diana Peterson at the earliest opportunity. But first things first, as they say. After finalizing the next phase of our plan, I told TSA to keep a low profile and assured her that I would take responsibility if anything went wrong. It was after 3 a.m. when Paula finally got home. I was sitting up with a beer in one hand and a stack of papers in the other, printouts of all her emails with the general from the previous day. "Oh, honey, you're still up?" she asked, a surprised and somewhat guilty look on her face. "Yep, waiting on you, baby," I replied with a hint of sarcasm. "Had fun with the general." "Oh, I mean, the girls," I added, my smile devoid of any warmth. "What are you talking about, John? You've been drinking," she tried to dismiss. "I'm talking about this, my darling, faithful wife," I said, standing and handing her the emails I had printed. Each one contained messages between her and General David Peterson, detailing their plans for that night. She gasped as she read through them, but her response wasn't what I expected. "You spied on me," she shrieked, going on the offensive. "Wow, I catch you betraying me, and all you can do is accuse me of spying. Go to hell," I shouted back. "And don't worry about your friend. He's going to be part of the divorce paperwork too," I added, my tone more conversational, but with a sharp edge. "What have you done?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I've already sent your emails to Mrs. Peterson too. She'll probably be filing for divorce on Monday unless she's okay with this betrayal," I replied, giving her a cold smile. "Tell me, Paula, did she or I deserve what you and your so-called friend did to us?" But she wasn't listening. She was already on the phone. "Yes, it's me. John knows. He's already sent the emails to your wife. I know. What are you going to do about it? Okay, fine, she said before hanging up, turning to me with a smug expression. Let me guess, I'm fired. No big surprise there, I smiled back. Worse than that, traitor, she shot back, triumphantly unaware that her phone conversations were still being recorded. Traitor? Me? You two are the ones putting national security at risk, I countered. The director of the CIA involved in something like this. Do you even realize the potential consequences if a hostile foreign power found out? At least with everything out in the open, there won't be any blackmail. Paula's face paled at that, realizing the full extent of the situation. Cheaters never plan for the worst-case scenarios. I walked over to where my gym bag was and picked it up. While you think about how you've damaged our marriage, your career, your lover's career, and how you nearly caused a breach in this country's security, Paula, also think about the pain you've caused me, Mrs. Peterson, and their children. At least we don't have kids. With those words, I left her sobbing as I exited the house and headed to my '79 Camaro Z28. The red paint with the twin racing stripes down the body still made it my pride and joy. My dad and I had restored the classic car back when I was in high school. He bought me the body for my 14th birthday, and by the time I was 16, we had it fully restored. The first time I drove it after getting my license, I got pulled over for speeding. The cop let me off with a warning, and I took that to heart, driving more carefully from then on. I tossed my gym bag into the back seat, started the powerful 350 V8, and pulled out of the driveway. I backed in for a quick getaway and couldn't resist squealing the tires as I gunned the engine. Inside my bag were several changes of clothes, some personal items, and my Colt M1911, a .45 ACP pistol that had belonged to my grandpa. It had a few parts replaced over the years, but it's still in perfect working order with the original barrel, grips, trigger, hammer, and slide. I had made it about 15 miles toward my safe house when I noticed black SUVs closing in behind me. I pushed the Camaro to its limits, watching the needle climb past 120 miles per hour, grinning as I left the SUVs in the dust. But the real problem wasn't the vehicles. It was the FBI chopper pacing me, its spotlight tracking my every move. When I pulled over, grabbed my pistol, and started firing, I was shocked when the spotlight shattered, probably the luckiest shot of my life. I couldn't help but laugh, then got back in the car as I heard the SUVs trying to catch up. I gunned it again, put on my night vision goggles, and cut the lights on my Camaro. 75 miles later, I pulled off the road onto a dirt path leading to my safe house. To clarify, the CIA technically has no jurisdiction to operate within the United States, but if you think they don't operate domestically because it's illegal, you need to get your head out of the sand. With that in mind, I had secured an old CIA black site in rural Virginia as my safe house. It looked like a dilapidated farmhouse, supposedly once a stop on the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. After acquiring the site's codes, I deleted it from the CIA registry, one of the precautions I took while planning for this situation. As director of the CIA, General David Peterson had vast resources at his disposal, including the ability to mobilize all branches of Homeland Security. With me on the loose, holding evidence that could end his career, he decided to use them. I sent the emails to Diana Peterson from my main account, keeping my dummy account clean. I then informed TSA of my location using her new dummy account. The old adage, trust no one, can only go so far. I had to trust someone, and that person was TSA Martin. From a nearby coffee shop, I sent the incriminating emails between General Peterson and Paula Blakely to every major news network, including Fox News. I also included recordings of Paula's conversations with him from the night I discovered their affair. Now I was the subject of a worldwide manhunt led by the CIA, FBI, and NSA. My Camaro was safely hidden in the underground garage back at the black site, and I was riding an old Harley Panhead that I had found there. With my new scraggly look, the bike suited me better than it would have before. TSA kept me updated on developments at home. She said that Peterson had managed to talk his wife out of filing for divorce, at least for now. And oddly, none of the news networks had run my evidence yet, not even Fox News. We communicated using burner phones, making us difficult to trace unless the NSA had voice recognition software active, which they likely did. In a surprising show of solidarity, my entire IT team resigned after learning what happened, and because I had forwarded all the emails to them. Upon hearing about what happened and knowing I had sent the emails to my team, they decided to go into business for themselves. Good men and women, all of them. It was a few weeks later, and I still had enough canned rations to last another 5 years, when TSA showed up at the safe house. She arrived unannounced, so when she opened the door to the bunker from the underground garage, she found herself facing the barrel of my .45. Okay, I take it you don't like visitors, she squeaked. I lowered the weapon to my side. You could have called ahead, I said, then chuckled. She threw herself into my arms, hugging me tightly. Sorry, John. I didn't want to risk the NSA tracing my call. What about Tails? You knew you were probably followed, right? I asked. I lost them, she replied with a self-satisfied smirk. Then she leaned forward and gave me a kiss on the cheek. You need a shave. I'll shave when I don't need to be on the run anymore, I smirked back. What brings you by? I just wanted to see you and make sure you're okay, she said as she let me go and followed me into the living room. We sat on the couch together. I looked at her and thought, God, she's gorgeous. That can't be the only reason. What's going on back at Langley? She rolled her eyes. The main news networks are finally investigating your claims and evidence. So far, your fugitive status hasn't been made public, which is both good and bad. Good because they're not using the news to find you. And bad because once it gets out, they'll have to take your evidence seriously. I nodded, understanding the situation. What are you going to do? I'm not entirely sure anymore, I admitted. I could wait to see if the local law enforcement gets involved, or make a surprise appearance on the Today Show in New York, but that might be too risky. I smiled at her. I'm going to cut the head off the snake. Her mouth opened in shock. John, you can't. If you kill him, she began, but trailed off, shaking her head. TSA, do you trust me? I asked, looking her in the eyes. Of course, she nodded. Trust me now, I said, taking her into my arms. We shared a deep, emotional kiss. Her arms wrapped around my neck as we kissed passionately. She didn't notice the needle I used to administer a tranquilizer. The tranquilizer took effect quickly. You can't follow me where I'm going. You can't be part of this, I whispered as I carried her into the bedroom. I laid her gently on the bed, checked her pulse to make sure I hadn't given her too much, and then kissed her tenderly before leaving the room. I felt a pang of guilt, like Rick in Casablanca leaving someone who truly cared for me. But I didn't want her caught in the crossfire. I grabbed some weapons and ammo from the bunker's arsenal, including 2 sets of handcuffs. The 9mm ammo and the Uzi and HE MP5 were in decent condition with no misfires, so I chose the suppressed MP5 SMG and loaded up my Colt with some .45 ACP rounds. I holstered my weapon, slung the MP5, and walked to the underground garage. I debated taking the Harley but decided against it, not wanting to risk drawing attention. I also considered using TSA's car but opted for my trusty Camaro instead. If I was going to face danger, I wanted one last memorable drive. I smiled as I opened the door and tossed the SMG onto the passenger seat. Buckling up, I started the engine and listened to the rumble as it roared to life. I hit the garage door opener and drove up the ramp into the dusk of Central Virginia. With my night vision goggles on, I drove fast, making a call from my burner phone before reaching my destination. I gave my location and promised that everything would be explained if they met me at a certain address. Soon, I arrived in General Peterson's neighborhood and parked crossways behind Paula's car in front of the garage. No matter which car tried to leave, it would have to run over mine. Paula's presence made my plan even more significant. I grabbed the HK and made my way quickly to the front door. Ringing the bell, I waited with the SMG at the ready. Diana answered the door and gasped. I put my finger to my lips in the universal shush gesture, and Diana nodded, her eyes wide with shock. As I entered, she backed up slightly with her hands raised. I leaned forward and whispered, "Diana, you have nothing to worry about. You're the only innocent one here." I gave her a reassuring smile. "I'm not going to harm anyone if I can help it." She gulped and nodded. "I guess so," she said, a hint of relief in her voice. "Ma'am, you just have to trust me. I'm not going to harm either of them, but they've been cheating on us for quite a while," I said seriously. She nodded again, giving me a nervous smile. I slipped my left hand into my pocket and started the recorder, then motioned for Diana to lead me into the living room where David and Paula were sitting. David's smile froze and disappeared when he saw my disheveled appearance and the weapons I was holding. "The traitor himself," David shouted, but I leveled my weapon at him before he could rise. "Is that what you told your wife? A hole?" I growled. "That my proof of your betrayal was just me trying to undermine national security." Paula, who had heard what I said to her the night I left, looked horrified. "We can explain, baby," she pleaded. "No, you can't explain anything," I retorted. "If anyone is a traitor here, it's you two," I commanded, "Strip," in my most authoritative voice. When General Peterson hesitated, I shot the phone between them. The suppressed MP5 made a muffled puff as the bullet destroyed the house phone. Paula began to undress, and General Peterson soon followed suit. "Wow, Paula, you must not have been cheating on me because of his size," I said harshly. The general was obviously not impressive, and Paula blushed, looking away in shame, though she remained a striking woman. The whole world would soon see just how exposed she was. "What are you going to do?" Diana asked. "I think they need to be humiliated somewhat. Don't you agree?" I asked with a smile. Diana nodded in agreement, her smirk revealing her satisfaction. She looked at her naked husband and sneered. "I hope you get fired for this. Like you ever satisfied me with that." I grinned at Diana's remark. "Knock him down a few pegs," I said, feeling a mix of satisfaction and pity for the situation. "Now, what happens next depends on your honesty. Since we know the affair has been happening, I'll ask a series of questions. Your answers will determine your fate." They nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Diana slapped her husband across the face, and he took it, glaring at me as I trained my weapon on him. "Oh no, sir, don't glare at me like that," I said. "You and my soon-to-be ex-wife brought this on yourselves. You tried to use me as a scapegoat so you wouldn't be seen as a threat to national security, right?" "It wasn't supposed to be that way," David said calmly. "How was it supposed to be then? Care to enlighten me?" I asked, aiming at his head. "You were never supposed to find out," he said evenly. "Just out of curiosity, how long have you two been involved?" I asked, dropping all pretense of civility. "For years," Paula said sheepishly, "since your first trip to Afghanistan." I confirmed her statement with a nod. "I'm sorry, John," she said with a pleading look. "Sorry you got caught, right?" I snarled. Diana added, "I know my almost ex-husband is sorry he got caught." She reached down and squeezed David painfully, causing him to fall to his knees in agony. I smirked. "I bet that hurt." Diana laughed. "No bet here." Diana then looked at me and asked, "John, could you do me a favor and shoot my husband's little bird off?" I don't know if I could hit something that small, but I'll give it a try. I grinned. Diana laughed, but Paula was now begging. "You have your confession. Just let us go." "Sure, go ahead," I shrugged. "But you'll leave this house naked." I approached Paula and removed the handcuffs from my pocket, slapping them on her as she stood there in shock. I pushed her towards the front door, opened it, and shoved her outside into the spotlight from the news van parked on the street. Her hands were cuffed behind her back, and in an attempt at modesty, she curled up on the grass. Diana and I laughed as we watched from the door. "Diana, leave out the back. You don't need to be here for what's about to happen. For your own dignity, it would be best if you left," I said. "Go out the back and around to the other side gate. I trust you in this, John. You're a good man," she said, giving me a hug and a kiss on the cheek before heading towards the kitchen. I walked back into the living room, pulling out the second pair of handcuffs from my pocket. General Peterson was still trying to recover from Diana's earlier treatment when I reached him and cuffed his hands behind his back. "Now, General, it's time for your day in the spotlight," I snarled as I led him to the front door. His limp was pronounced from Diana's earlier actions. I opened the door and shoved him outside, where he tumbled into the grass beside a still distressed Paula. I waved to the camera crew from the door, and then closed and locked it. I turned off all the lights and made my way to the General's home office. As I sat there, drinking the General's scotch and smoking one of his Cuban cigars, I mentally prepared for the aftermath. If I was going to face serious consequences, I would at least enjoy myself a bit first. I sat with my Colt on my knee, feeling a sense of peace. The old pistol had seen a lot of action over the last century, having been made in 1912 and used in both world wars, Korea and Vietnam. It had been a gift from my dad after my grandpa died. I smiled as I looked at it, regretting only that I hadn't reconciled with T before setting off on this crusade. I hoped she could eventually forgive me. I was jolted from my thoughts by the phone on the General's desk ringing. I picked it up. "This is General Denver. I'm afraid the General is indisposed at the moment. May I take a message?" I leaned back, putting my feet up on the desk as I took another puff from the cigar. "Mr. Blakely, this is Patrick Lackland from Channel 10 News. Can you tell us why you've stripped your wife and former boss and thrown them out of the house?" the voice asked. I gave him the rundown on the situation, explaining that I was now the subject of a worldwide manhunt due to the evidence of my wife's affair with the General. I provided details of their confessions and how they had set me up to take the fall to avoid being implicated in any ethical violations or seen as a threat to national security. "Why would an affair be a matter of national security?" he asked. "Because if a hostile foreign power found out, they could easily blackmail them," I explained. "But now that it's all out in the open, I think I've earned my right to be heard. My wife began an affair with the General for reasons unknown to me. It wasn't about sex or lack of attention. If I had to guess, it was probably due to his power as a high-ranking officer and CIA director. I heard sirens approaching, which meant the authorities were finally on their way. Well, Mr. Lackland, I believe my ride is here. I'll be surrendering shortly," I said. "But before I do, I want to say one thing." "What is it, Mr. Blakely?" he asked. "I'm sorry if I had to do it over again. I wouldn't have sedated you," I said. "Please make sure that message gets broadcast on every newscast between now and tomorrow evening." "I think that can be arranged, Mr. Blakely. Good luck to you," he replied before ending the call. I figured my luck couldn't get much worse. I poured another 3 fingers of scotch and puffed one last time on the cigar. I set the Colt on the desk, ejected the magazine, and racked the slide to remove the live round. I placed the round in the magazine and locked the slide back. I did the same with the MP5. When the SWAT team burst through the front door, I stubbed out the cigar and finished the scotch. I replaced the bottle's top and stood up with my hands in the air. The first officer through the door saw me in a surrender position, so he had his team cover him while he moved forward to handcuff me. He then advised me of my Miranda rights, which I acknowledged. When asked if I understood, I chose to remain silent, except to request an attorney and my one phone call. I requested Rick Sanderson as my attorney and used the phone call to contact T. "Hello," she answered groggily on the 5th ring. "T, it's me. I'm sorry for what I did. You drugged me, she slurred. Yes, I did. I didn't want you following me and getting caught up in this, I explained. I'm in jail right now. But if you want the full story, watch the news. Patrick Lackland on Channel 10 got my exclusive interview, in case you were wondering. I said with a slight grin. It was all out in the open now, nothing hidden like Paula and her general would have wanted. John, I'm coming to bail your sorry ass out of jail. Then I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. She threatened, her voice clear and strong. Yeah, I figured you might. At least I managed to keep you out of jail, and that's worth it to me, I said with a smile, which earned a chuckle from her. Okay, smartass, I'll be there in the morning. I have the number on my caller ID, so I'll be there soon, she said. Thanks. I really do owe you one, I replied. See you in the morning. Bye, John, she said before hanging up. I was led back to the holding cell, this time placed alone, probably because word had spread that I might pose a danger to the other inmates. I could live with that. I spent the time doing push-ups, sit-ups, and even pull-ups by tilting the bunk beds on end and using the bar at the head of the top one. Afterward, I caught a quick nap, waking up just in time for my arraignment. Rick was already there when I entered the courtroom. He just chuckled and shook his head when he saw me. Rick and I had met in college, where he was studying law. He had moved to Virginia several years after Paula and I did, but we had reconnected with him and his wife, Amelia. Rick is like me. He doesn't share, and I couldn't blame him for that. I planned to ask him to handle my divorce. We managed to talk for about 5 minutes before the judge arrived. Rick agreed to handle the divorce. When Judge Reinhold, no relation, entered, he asked us to be seated. Rick made a very persuasive argument for me to be released on my own recognizance. When asked why, I stood and explained that I had been made the scapegoat by my boss, General David Peterson, and my wife, his lover Paula Blakely. Rick had the evidence on file, and the judge saw things our way due to the circumstances, allowing me to collect my personal effects. As I walked out of the station with Rick, we were met by a very irate Tulsa Martin. I smiled, and she slapped me across the face. I deserve that, I said, more for Rick's benefit than mine. You deserve a lot more than that, she said as I rubbed my face. I agree. At least you didn't have to spend the night in there. I smiled, gesturing back at the police station. For some reason, the feds hadn't shown up to press their case against me, despite knowing I'd been caught. They were keeping their distance, at least for now. At least I got my Colt back after showing them my CIA ID. It seems that in his haste to declare me an enemy of the state, the general had failed to officially fire me. So I just smiled, accepted my grandfather's sidearm, and walked out to be met by my aforementioned assistant, who was still very upset with me. Her expression softened, and she threw her arms around me, hugging me tightly. Never do that again, she commanded. I won't, as long as I don't have a reason to do it, I promised. Good, because I don't want you in jail or worse, she exclaimed. The charges against me were dropped due to extenuating circumstances, for which I was grateful. The FBI had intervened, and it seemed General Peterson was going to be called before Congress to testify about his affair and the national security threat it posed. The recordings I sent to the news networks and posted online had exposed everything, including the identities of the CIA director and my soon-to-be ex-wife. My Camaro was still where I'd parked it the night before, and after picking it up, I followed Tulsa home. My house held nothing I really wanted anymore. I'd taken everything when I left. When we arrived, she handed me a spare key, and I went inside, removed my wedding ring, and tossed it in the garbage. As far as I was concerned, Paula and I were already divorced. Tulsa saw me do it. Hey John, does that mean what I think it means? She asked. It means that as far as I'm concerned, Paula no longer exists. Rick is serving her the papers today, wherever she is. She's probably shacked up with her lover. I'm giving her nothing but the house. Forget alimony or spousal maintenance. She owes me that much. I said with a smirk. I turned off my cell phone to avoid any calls from her irate family. I want you, Telsa said as she stepped closer, taking my hand with a smile. Come with me, she whispered, leading me to her bedroom. In the adjoining bathroom, she sat me down on the toilet seat and lathered up my face with shaving gel. With gentle hands and a steady blade, she carefully shaved my face. Our eyes met, my dark blue ones with her warm, chocolate-brown gaze, and we shared a quiet smile. Of all the things I'd done over the years with Paula, nothing felt as intimate as allowing Telsa to shave me. When she finished, she leaned down and kissed me tenderly. Now it's shower time, she said with a smile, pointing me toward the shower. I'll grab some towels. As I rinsed off, I heard the shower door slide open. Telsa returned, and we shared a moment of closeness that went beyond anything I'd experienced before. We spent the day talking about who we were and what we wanted out of life. She confessed that she had harbored a crush on me since we first met, and I admitted that she was the only woman who had ever caught my attention, even when I was with Paula. We laughed, realizing that we were meant to be together, but agreed to take things slowly. 6 months later, we were back with our team in the Cyber Warrior Division at the CIA, and our relationship deepened. When my divorce from Paula was finalized, I asked Telsa to marry me. She said yes, tears of joy streaming down her face, and I took great pleasure in slipping the ring onto her finger. Paula moved back west after the divorce. We split the house sale equally, and that was the end of it. General Peterson, however, was not as fortunate. After Paula and I were served with our divorce papers, his wife took him to the cleaners, using every scrap of evidence I provided. The judge was furious about the situation, and the general was forced to resign from his position for national security reasons. He tried to get revenge on me, but it ended with him in the hospital. After his release, he disappeared, and no one ever heard from him again. Telsa and I invited Paula to our wedding, but she didn't show up. The last I heard, she was in Seattle. As for Telsa and me, we were married and moved to Los Angeles together. She introduced me to her family, and I transferred from the CIA to the FBI's Lay Field office. Telsa resigned from the CIA and recently announced that she's pregnant. I'm going to be a father. Looking back on my life with Paula, it pales in comparison to the life Telsa and I have built together. I've never been happier.